Shaping a More Equal Future, Confronting Inequality for Global Progress. Please welcome your host from Premium Times, Nigeria, Musikilu Mojeed.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Musikilu Mojeed. I'm honored to moderate this critical session on shaping a more equal future, confronting inequality for global progress. Let me begin with a simple but stark reality. Today, the richest 1% of the world's population owns nearly half of the world's wealth. In contrast, billions struggle to access the most basic healthcare, education, and decent work. Inequality is not just a statistics. It shapes lives, choices, and futures, and it has real consequences. In my country, Nigeria, despite rising GDP figures, millions remain excluded from the benefit of growth. Rural women still die in childbirth due to poorly funded clinics, and youth employment continues to fuel insecurity. But this is not just a national issue. Globally, inequality is undermining progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, and it is persistent despite international frameworks and donor commitments. This session will explore how governments and partners can work together at national, bilateral, and multilateral levels to reverse this trend. How can we foster a just society and ensure a more sustainable future? How can we accelerate efforts to combat inequality globally? Before we start the discussions, let me begin by welcoming our panelists. Niels Annen is the State Secretary at Germany's Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. Welcome. Welcome. Amitabh Behar is the Executive Director of Oxfam International. Welcome. Yeah. Fernando Marani is the Director of the Inequality and Exclusion Program at Pathfinders International. Welcome. And then Kadiatu Allie is the Deputy Minister of Finance for Sierra Leone. Welcome. Welcome. By the way, the government of Germany and Pathfinders are hosting this session. We thank them. Now let's get down to business. We have just 45 minutes. 3 minutes, panelists should speak for just 3 minutes when responding to questions. And so I'll come to you first, Mr. Behar. From civil society perspectives, what are the global challenges in the fight against inequalities? I know that your organization has been working extremely hard on this problem. What exactly have you been doing?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me here. Let me try and put the conversation in context. And let me start by saying that just imagine a world where you have a receptionist paying higher taxes than the billionaire that she works for. That's the world that we are living in. I think it's a massive scandal, which is we are just sleeping through this scandal. At this moment, Kaushik Basu, who was the chief economist of the World Bank, he was the chief economic advisor to Government of India, he said that in some time we look back at this moment and look at the level of inequality the way we look at slave trade some time back. That's the level of enormity that we are talking about. Inequality is growing at a massive scale. If you look at from 2020 to 24, the top 5 billionaires doubled their wealth, but that's the time when 60% of the global population, which is 5 billion people, actually became poorer. Last year, the billionaires have added 3 trillion to their kitty. And on the other hand, there are around 750 million people who don't get 3 square meals a day. That's the level of inequality. You have already talked about the richest 1% owning more than 90% of the global wealth. So what is also important is that, very often we've missed this, that this is now indicates the first time where the gap between the North and the South countries is again growing. And that needs to be underscored in the context of SDG 10. Inequality is clearly tearing our societies. What it is doing is giving rise to oligarchies. And you can't have a better example of the oligarchy, global oligarchy, where you have a billionaire president backed by the richest man in the world. And what it does is that eventually you are looking at social unrest, political unrest, breakdown of social cohesion. And at this moment, I think it's really important what Oxfam is doing with many others, and really delighted to see the alliance coming on inequality. So thanks to government of Germany, government of Sierra Leone, Pathfinders, that we are coming together to ensure that inequality is at the center of these conversations. I think that's really critical. Let me just say that it's important for us to acknowledge that inequality is not inevitable. Inequality is a political choice we make. It is actually a political choice that we make, and when you have an alliance of this kind coming together, there are serious possibilities of change.
We'll come back to the alliance. Okay. We'll come back to the alliance. Let's talk about the problem a bit. So, Minister Kadiatu Allie, because he talked about the alliance, which your country is very much involved in. What are the inequality challenges in Sierra Leone, and how are you tackling them?
Thank you very much for inviting Sierra Leone to this forum. I'm delighted to be here. I want to point out that in general, over the past decade, welfare in Sierra Leone has improved for our people. Nonetheless, the inequality has increased. As a country, we have fallen in the Gini coefficient, we're falling quite a bit. And typically, what is responsible for this is the inability to collect enough internal generated revenues to focus on social needs of our people. Last year, we also got GDP rebased, which means that we found out that our GDP actually doubled. But what that meant then was that the percentage of revenue generated as a percentage of total GDP went down, and hence the space to focus on these social issues also decreased. As a country, what we're doing about it is, one, we have a medium-term development program. We have implemented a budget that is pro-people, pro-poor people for development. We have a big 5 game changers. One, we're investing in agriculture, because 70% of our people are engaged in agriculture. We're making sure they have access to better seeds to improve productivity. We're giving them access to beneficiation, to access to electricity, which we're highly subsidizing as a government. We're giving them free quality education to create a plain level field for people to compete and hence get up the ladder. We are also providing free healthcare to the vulnerable, to women and lactating mothers. We are we have invested in radical inclusion to make sure that pregnant women and lactating mothers do have access and continue to take part in the educational system. We have free school feeding for the poor and vulnerable in schools. And what we find is that not only are the students' attendance increasing, the teachers are also showing up for school, so which is very good. We're investing heavily in infrastructure to make sure we link these agricultural center zones that we've created, to make sure they're linked now to market, so that people can now take their goods to market.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for giving us insight into what your country is doing. Secretary Annen, what do you think are the most pressing global challenges regarding inequalities, and how can multilateral solutions help?
That's you.
Yeah, that's you. That's you.
Sorry, I thought you were asking him.
No.
Look, first of all, it's great to be here and with all of you. And we just had a signing moment, and I think it's very crucial for what lays ahead of us that we address the question of inequality. You mentioned the general trend, and I think there's not that much that I can add to the description of the problem. What I do want to add is that as we are here in Hamburg, in Germany, in a rich and prosperous country, in spite of all the challenges that we also have to face, I think there's often in that discussion a misunderstanding in the Western developed countries that inequality is a reflection of inequality between the global South and the global North. That is an issue, and unfortunately a growing problem. Yeah. However, this is not only a discussion between the North and the South. Inequalities in our own societies, of course, do not have the direct impact on ordinary people's life. As in my country, we have a strong social welfare system, we have strong automatic stabilizers. So the immediate impact of that development is not felt from one day to another, but it is eroding the legitimacy of our democracy. And it is affecting all societies, rich and poor societies. So I'm really wondering why there is so much hesitation to even talk about the issue. And you mentioned the trend towards oligarchy. I mean, we need to be clear. This is also about economic interest. So the pressure on internationally agreed language, might sound trivial to you because it's only about talking about issues like equality, like women's rights, etc. But it's really about substance. It's about policy. So I think, as you ask me, we have a job to do here at home in Germany. We are increasingly also an unequal society. But we have a weight on the international scene. And I do think what the finance minister of Germany this morning said, that is our job to implement that, to build alliances that may surprise also some actors on the international scene, and build the groundwork for the heavy lifting, which will include also direct measures to tackle inequality. And that's not going to be done without tackling questions like taxation, for example, and redistribution of wealth.
Okay, we'll come back to the alliances that are being built to tackle inequality. But first, let me come to Fernando Marani of Pathfinder International. I know that you've been working to reduce global inequality. You created an inequality solution portal, a one-stop resource of applied, well-researched global policy driving towards a more equitable and inclusive world. You also, with the support of the German government, established a global alliance against inequality. What are these two solutions about?
Thank you, Musikilu, and really it's a pleasure for me also to be here in this stage. This has been a long dream from us to be able to put together different partners to discuss inequality. And as you can see already on some of the topics that we touch base, it's not an easy conversation. Our program, the Pathfinders, is hosted by the New York University, by the Center of International Cooperation. So we come from the academic background, and it was launched in 2016. The idea was how we can support governments and the UN system to create more peaceful, just, and inclusive society. So what many of the people working on SDGs know, and SDG 16. And early on the research was clear that part of that discussion should not only include access to justice, reducing the violence in our countries, but also discuss inequality. And as it has been said, inequality is a growing problem. It's a difficult discussion. And the research that we produce show that there are at least two things that we need in place in order to change the narrative. Because as Amitabh says, the first feeling that everyone gets is, okay, inequality is inevitable, there's nothing that we can do, it's a complex topic, so we want to change that narrative. The first step was to create the Inequality Solution Portal that you were referencing. It's a digital platform. You can go online. It's like browsing it on Netflix, but actually it's browsing on good policies that have been researched by our community of research and NYU together with the UN system that show effective solutions to tackle inequality. There are more than 100 policies from 48 countries in 4 different languages, because we want to show that it's possible. It's possible at local level, it's possible at national level, and now we come to this international level. Why inequality is so difficult to tackle? Because it's about distribution of resources and about distribution of power. That is the core of the topic. And that's why we're very glad that we can have now this platform, the Global Alliance Against Inequality, that is set up with this philosophy of a new multilateralism, a new articulated multilateralism. Then we have governments, we have civil society, we have academia, and hopefully soon the UN system and a private sector all coming together to discuss these issues. What we have to do together is not only to commit to address the challenges domestically, but also to have a space to discuss these difficult issues at international level, to ensure that inequality is always high in the agenda in the multilateral level. And this is exactly like a great opportunity, not only because we're in Hamburg in the context of the Sustainability Conference, but because this year ahead of us, we have really very important milestone that could really help to change this tendency. FFD4, the Financing for Development, happen in a few months, few weeks actually at this stage, but also the World Social Summit at the end of the year, and the HLPF that will review SDG 10 on inequality next year.
Well, before I come to the Secretary, please, can you tell us what impact these solutions are already having?
Yeah, I think that, let me give you one example on, this portal was, the Inequality Solution Portal was launched a little bit more than a year ago. We have more than 250,000 visitors for 183 different countries coming to it. And we measure, which policies are being visited and from where those visits are coming. And 6 months ago, one of the policies in Arabic, it's a policy about the family code from Morocco, started to grow immensely, like the amount of people visiting. And it was because the government of Morocco announced a reform of that family code, and there was not actually information on, available on what does it mean and how that could really affect positively or negative the advance that Morocco have had on empowering women and girls through the family reform of the code in 2004. So first is like to provide information to consumers in a simple and direct way that is really well researched and evidence-based. That is the first step, and we are happy to see that demand that we thought was there is actually there. So we hope to continue growing that.
Okay. So, Secretary Annen, yeah, your country strongly supports the Global Alliance Against Equality. So what are your contributions to the alliance so far, and what are your expectations from this collaborative framework, especially in the context of multilateralism and the upcoming 4th International Conference on Financing for Development?
No, look, I think, first of all, partnership is important for us. And getting direct access to, point of views and understanding discussions that are being relevant to our partners, like what you described, Minister, about policies in your country. That, I think, is a value in itself. Partnership in a sense that we build sufficiently the basis to put the issue back on the international agenda, which is increasingly difficult. I mentioned that in the previous statement. I think we have been rather comfortable while integrating also language on inequality in international statements. And we have been complaining about the lack of implementation, and that is still the case. But now even the language begins to disappear. So I think we need to create also confidence in our ability to shape that agenda. And we did that, for example, and I do think it's a good example for that kind of leadership that is required these days, when Germany and Namibia had the role of a co-facilitator to bring about what then became the Pact for the Future in New York. And if you read the document, sometimes you have the applause of the General Assembly and some nice press clippings, and the other day there's another topic dominating again the discussion. But I invite you to actually read the document. There are a lot of tasks, especially for the upcoming financing for development in Seville, with regard to the international financial architecture. And that's basically all about the question of equal access to finance and equality or inequality. Yep. So that's my hope, very concrete hope, that we can achieve a contribution toward implementing that together with our new partners.
Thank you. Minister Allie, your country is currently co-chairing the Global Alliance Against Inequality with the Czech Republic.
Yes.
So what was your country's motivation for joining the alliance, and how can this alliance help to upscale efforts to reduce inequality in our world?
So the message for us here today is that regardless of your development status in society, we all need to work together, whether you're emerging, you're developed or developing economies. We need to work together to eliminate the barriers that hinder ongoing efforts to make the world a more just, inclusive, and people-centric environment. With that, Sierra Leone's motivation, and we're delighted to be co-chairing, is to continue the partnership that we have with other countries to make sure that institutions continue to be strong, that we make efforts to increase the revenue mobilization so that we can then use those resources to focus on the most vulnerable of us in society. We have to make sure that our institutions practice social protection systems, we practice good governance, and promote political and civil participation. We believe that the alliance will also help us mitigate certain effects of climate change, because there are certain non-traditional barriers to inequality that we alone cannot fight. We need an alliance like we have now to make sure that everybody buys into that vision. We need to invest in local and national and international data collection. And we believe that this forum provides us that platform, that together we can make faster and bolder improvements to what we're already doing in Sierra Leone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I come now to Amitabh. What's your take on the formation of the Global Alliance? And what are your expectations? And how do you think the alliance can best deliver results?
So, I think the panel has said it. The Hamburg Summit has said it, that we are meeting at a particularly fragile moment. And at this fragile moment, I think an alliance of this kind really signals the space for still a future which is just and equal. So I think it's really an ambitious moment for us. And what we must start with, to not let the ambition go down. In fact, what we need at this juncture is to take our ambition higher for an equal world. But let me also say that this is a critical year, and we have kind of had references to it. In just a few weeks' time, we meet in Spain for the Financing for Development. Big conversations. Again, as Minister said, there are conversations that are around questions of inequality, questions of access to resources. Let's not forget, we're going to then move to Social Development Summit happening after a long, long time. We have the presidency of G20 with South Africa. So this is a moment where we can really build a coalition of willing. We can ensure, particularly with this alliance coming together, that forces which are working towards an equal society coalesce around it. So it's a great moment, and there are very specific asks. We need to recognize that it's not that tangible measures have not been taken. Just look at the UN Tax Convention. Look at the G20 declaration for taxing the ultra-rich. So there are different initiatives that have been taking shape, and that's what we need to work. I hope that this coalition can do 3 or 4 specific things. One, focus on taxing the super rich. The second, support the UN Tax Convention. Third, transform the debt architecture. Let me also just add one more data point here, that 90% countries in the South are spending now more than 43% of their budgets on debt reservicing. Mm-hmm. And what are they doing? Cutting on education, health, basic public services. So that's the third. Fourth, and I think this is really an important conversation, looking up to you also in particular, that we must ensure 0.7 ODA. And then the fifth is, again, very, very important, ring fence investments in public services like education, health, social security, which are very well-known drivers of an equal society. So this is a moment, I would really say that this is a moment where we bring together different forces and actually dream of that just an equal world and move towards it.
Okay. I'll come to the audience because we want this to be a conversation, actually. But before then, Fernando, I want you to tell us what is the next chapter for those 2 important solutions. I mean, the Inequality Solution Portal and then the Global Alliance, which your organization is coordinating.
Thank you, Musikilu. I think that from our side, of course, coming from the academic background, the first thing is to continue expanding knowledge. And that has hand in hand with more data, more measurement. So that's one of the things that we hope both the portal, but also the Alliance will help us to achieve. And then, because we are very conscious of the need of political coordination, I think that the next step of this alliance that today was launched with the support of Germany, Sierra Leone, Czechia, and Norway is to start growing as a cross-regional space where countries can come together to coordinate these difficult discussions and find point of commonalities. In the diplomatic world, there is 2 moments. No? One is the thing that is happening on the negotiation room, where it's like playing poker. You have your cards, you cannot show your cards because you are afraid to lose your position. But actually, as important as what is happening on the negotiation room is what is happening outside. And that's where we come as an alliance. We want to create a safe space that countries can have those discussions and find the point of commonalities to advance and achieve really important results. That solidarity will come from having honest discussion, from acknowledging which are our limitations in each and our countries and societies, as we heard here today, but also being open-minded to learn from others. Our commitment from the side of Pathfinders, of course, is like starting on this group of countries and organizations that we are here today to start growing in the next few months, that so we will come stronger for each of the moments that Amitabh was mentioning down the calendar this year.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists, for your insights on this critical global matter. I suspect there might be people in the hall who have perspectives to share or questions. So if you have anything to say, the microphone will come to you. Just raise your hand, and please try to be very brief. We don't have time on our hand. Anyone? Okay.
Sure. Hi, Nadara Youssef. I'm Executive Coordinator of the Global Governance Innovation Network. Great to see so many colleagues as well. This is really incredible because it's solution-oriented. It's not just sort of, here is a big problem that we can't solve. As we're going towards the kind of future of multilateralism and thinking about those types of conversations, because let's be honest, that's front and center of many people's minds, we know we have to move away from unilateral multilateralism, where one country pulls away and the whole system collapses. And so alliances like this are sort of seen as solutions for the future. But what then do you see as the role of multilateral institutions in these alliances? How can institutions like the UN, forums like the G20, World Bank, WTO, you know, there's so many from this post-World War order, how can they help this kind of new rebirth of multilateral cooperation?
I think you can't take that.
Can take that? I don't want to take that
No, you can
away
take...
from my colleagues. But look, I mean, this is like opening an entire new session. But I mean, you're right. And I will try to reduce my answer basically to a comment, because I think it's careless to believe that dismantling the UN system with its different organizations, or even severely weakening the system, which is already happening while we speak, will have no impact on the question of inequality. And the sad truth is that sometimes generations have been building institutions and institutional frameworks, which we are taking maybe too much for granted. And in our polarized debates, it's often the case that if you dismantle an organization, that then is the moment where you understand how important that contribution has been. So that's why we are fighting for 0.7 ODA, and we are fighting for a strong commitment to international institutions. Does that mean that the institutional setup is perfect? Certainly not. And I think it's a moment to look at the structures and to make the UN stronger and better, and which also maybe will include some difficult decisions. But in our discussion here on equality and access for people to basic services, who is doing that, especially in the most fragile settings? It's basically international institutions and UN organizations. So we should not be careless in doing that. And that's why also, again, we need strong partners. So defending the very idea of multilateral institutions.
I'm wondering if we can take one more I think from this side. Oh, this side of the hall. This side of the hall. That's right in front.
Thank you. You've discussed the role of governments, international organizations, and alliances. Do you see any role of the private sector in fighting inequality?
Yeah, I think a minister can take that.
Yes, most definitely. The government alone cannot succeed when we do things like this. We need all hands on deck. We need the private sector so much so. You alluded, somebody talked about the debt situation in the country. And as for Sierra Leone, I can relate to that very much so. We spend currently over 50% minimum of our internally generated revenue just to service them. So that's where institutions can come in. That's where private sector can come in and partner with us for some of the development goals that we want to do. The infrastructure, we can have a PPP arrangement where private sector comes in and say maybe paves the road, and then for tolling, over time, that becomes reverts to government. So most certainly, this cannot succeed without the private sector. It would not succeed without international partners. It would not succeed without the political will. The political class needs to come on board. So it is not only a country problem, it is a global problem that we all must work very hard to solve. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I was allowed to add something. I want to make a comment as a German citizen. Our economy has been, over the decades, very successful. And basically because we are very, as you know, export-driven economy. And I do think that German companies understand that if there's no stability and prosperity around us, this is bad for business. There's a moral argument, but there's also a business case. And we see that more and more business leaders are speaking up, also because they share the concern about the multilateral order and the predictability of politics. And I think there's an opportunity, again, also for new partnerships with the private sector. Sometimes I sometimes have the impression that there is an unrealistic expectation towards governments to cover all the risks. But we also sometimes have unrealistic expectations towards what entrepreneurship really means. So, but there is room for agreement here. So yes, we are all citizens. We all have a stake in the future. And so we should not artificially divide the discussion between politics and the private sector and civil society. That's my take on your question.
Yeah, I wanted to, I don't think we have time because I wanted, I don't think we can take any more contribution from the floor because I wanted the panelists to have 1 minute each for closing thoughts. You know, beginning from the extreme end. What's your, you know, your closing thought about how the world can come together from the private sector, from civil society, from government and multilateral institutions to tackle this huge problem? 1 minute, please.
Thank you. And I see the clock in front of us, so we'll keep it for 1 minute. Yeah. I think that I really love that the two questions brought the other actors that we want to involve, the UN system and the private sector. I think we advocate for a strong institution at national level as a way to create these societies that are cohesive and that really are good for business. We should also do the same for the international system. We do need a strong institution at the multilateral system, and we should not be afraid to change. I think that, as was mentioned by the Secretary, the Pact of the Future is really a good blueprint of what are the priorities on the multilateral world that we need to take into account and come together through these moments of reform. And I also, yeah, we need to have the private sector here discussing how they can contribute to this discussion and how they benefit, because a lot of the time it's just the lack of dialogue, the biggest obstacle. So my challenge is like next year, I want to see another panel about inequality, but also with civil society, with private sector at the UN system also standing here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for saying, Leone. I think we continue to encourage international partners to work with us as we try to improve the lives of our people through maybe debt reprofiling. That is a huge issue that is really hindering our progress in that space. We also look forward to private partnerships with donors, with other countries to come on and make sure, work with us to move up the ladder, not just remove raw materials from Sierra Leone, but to help us industrialize, to give more people opportunity along that line. We are grateful to be co-hosting, co-chairing this event, and we look forward to hopefully next year when we come back, we have more members. And we will continue as a country. The president is fully behind our path. We have medium-term revenue and development goals that we're channeling that is pro-people, pro-poor, and we'll continue along that line. And hopefully next year when we're here, we'll have a stronger and better story. Thank you.
Amitabh, 1 minute, please. Yes.
So, Madam Minister, I hope that even in Seville we have more members. We don't need to wait for next year. I really hope that. Just wanted to very quickly go back to the two questions. The first one, I totally agree, and that's why FFD is so critical. It is a space where you have one vote for one country. It's not $1 and one vote. And that fundamental difference needs to be recognized, and we need to put really trust in multilateralism and work with that. On the private sector, we work very closely with a coalition called Patriotic Millionaires. And they've recently done a survey of millionaires and billionaires. An overwhelming, I think 82 or 83% of them said that we are happy to be taxed more. I think it's important. So there are a few things that the private sector can immediately start doing. While I agree that it's a broader coalition that we need, it is about ensuring that they're paying the due share of taxes. We are not looking at tax havens. I think that's going to be critical. It's going to be important that we are ensuring not just minimum wages, but fair wages, and not just within the industries, but in the entire supply chain. So there are very tangible actions that can be done.
Thank you.
And if I just take one line that, as the minister was saying.
We don't have time.
Okay.
Because Fernando is already saying there will be next panel. Okay. You know, another panel on equality next year. So we can continue the discussion, definitely. So I think I've given you your minute ahead of now. So apologies that you can't have another. So thank you, panelists and everyone in the room for participating in this insightful discussion. We've heard some very powerful takeaways today. And the major takeaway is that inequality is a defining challenge of our time, but that through collective effort, political courage, and innovative financing, we can shape a more equal, sustainable future. As we move toward the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, let's carry these questions with us. What can each of us, whether in government, in civil society, in the private sector, or in international institutions, do to help close the inequality gap? Thank you to the organizers of the Hamburg Sustainability Conference, to our panelists, and to everyone who joined this vital conversation. Let's keep the momentum going. Thank you so much. Thank you.